Hi, it's V from Crafting Daily Dose, and I'm excited to share with you this alternative for the June 2021 paper pumpkin called The Adventure Begins. This is a gatefold card, and this camper is a lock that keeps the card closed. You can slide it off and open the card to reveal the message that's inside. Now, this is a pretty quick project, and other than some adhesive, it only requires a half a sheet of cardstock as an extra that's outside the kit. Let's go ahead and get started. So to start, we're going to be separating out the 3 panels from the card base. So I'm just putting this underneath my trimmer, and I'm going to put this crease and line it up with the center of my track. I'm using my darker blade, which is for cutting. Now pay attention to which is the top and which is the bottom, because we're going to cut off 1 1/4 inches from the bottom. So I'm going to be using the measurements that are on the right hand side of my trimmer. So I'm going to turn my paper this way. Again, this is the top and this is the bottom, and I'm going to put it at 1 1/4 inches. Now I'll bring this back, and I'm going to separate out this panel over here. This time I'm going to line up this colored edge with the center of my track, because I'm actually going to trim this down to remove all of the white. And the reason that I'm trimming it down is because this is going to go on the inside of the new card, and we have to trim off some to make it fit along the top and the bottom. And while we're doing that, we're just going to go ahead and trim off the sides as well, so that it'll be more even, since there won't be a white margin along the top and bottom. So I'm eyeballing where this transition is, and I'm going to put it in the center of my track. I'll go ahead and cut it. And I'm going to trim all the way around all the other white edges too. And I'll punch out the negative space from the die cut. Now I'm going to use my snips to cut this off, and also cut this off. Now, if you want to, you can leave this little piece to represent like the hitch for the camper, but I think it's going to bump up against stuff, and so I'm going to cut mine off. And then I'm also going to go down here and just round this out a little bit down by the wheel. Here's that negative space that we had punched out from the die cut, and we're going to trim this down to create the pieces that we need that go on the back of the camper to help it act as a locking mechanism. So I'm just going to even this up. I'm going to trim off this part right here. And then trim off the colored part. I want it to be approximately 1 1/2 inches, and it's okay if it's not exactly that. All right, now I'm going to trim off the colored part on here. And that's not necessary to do. I just think it looks a little bit neater to do it. Okay, now we're going to need to create 3 tabs. 2 of them are going to be scored, and then the other one is going to be plain. So I'm looking at the measurements on the right hand side here, and I'm going to go to 1/2 inch. going to be careful to move my cutting blade out of the way because I want to score it. So score at 1/2. And then cut at 1 inch. We'll repeat that again. Score at 1/2. Cut at 1 inch. And then for the last piece, we're just going to simply cut at 1 inch. So actually it might be easier for this little piece to do it this way. Okay, those pieces are ready to go. Now I have my piece of basic white cardstock. It is 4 1/4 by 11 inches, so it's basically just a sheet of cardstock that's been cut in half this way, and I'm going to go ahead and do some scoring. Now, if you're looking to make 2 of these, you can do the scoring first and then cut the sheet of cardstock in half. That's a little bit more efficient, but if you're just making 1, you're going to start out with a half sheet like this. Go ahead and turn it so that the long side is at the top, and we are going to score at 1 1/4 inches. So I'm putting my cardstock at 1 1/4 inches, moving my cutting blade out of the way, and I'll go ahead and score it. And then I'm going to go to 6 3/4. So you do need the extension arm out for this. 6 3/4 is going to be over here. Now go ahead and move your paper all the way to the end almost. And we are going to trim off just the tiniest bit from this other edge. So maybe just a 1/16 of an inch. Now, I often use the thick version of our basic white cardstock for card bases, but in this case, I think the regular weight actually works better since we're going to be adhering the card bases from the kit onto this, and we don't want everything to get too thick. We're going to be doing a little bit of stamping, and for clear photopolymer stamps, I like to do it on top of the mat from my Stamparatus just to give a little extra cushion. Now I'm stamping on the banner, and I'm choosing to put the fishtail part of my banner towards the left. The sentiment that we're using is "The world awaits you," and if you are using the stamping block that came with your paper pumpkin kit when you first subscribed, then remember that you can put this diagonally so that it will fit nicely on the block. I'm using the garden green ink from the kit. This one says, "Let the adventure begin." And we're already ready to start assembling. I'm going to fold my creases and reinforce them with bone folder. I'm putting Stampin' Seal on the colored panel, and I'm going to center it on the middle panel of my basic white card base. And so the center area is where I can write my message in the finished card. Now this panel that we had cut up, this is going to be for the front. This bottom piece is going to go alongside this bottom piece, and before you place it, just double check it against your other piece and make sure that they line up and that you haven't accidentally turned it upside down. Now I put this flush with the top edge, and I noticed as I was laying it down that my piece is a little bit shorter than my card base was. So all I did was I centered it horizontally so that this little white rim looks kind of intentional. The other option would be to go ahead and trim off a little bit from the card base, but I think it looks fine like this. Now I'm double checking to make sure that this is right side up. I turn my paper a lot when I'm putting on Stampin' Seal, and I want to make sure that I didn't accidentally turn it upside down. I'm going to go ahead and put it on, and I'm going to line it with the crease in my card. If there ends up being a little bit of overhang, it's a lot easier to trim it from this edge than to try to fix the crease. So I'm going to line it up here. And just like before, since this piece is a little bit less wide than my card base, I'm going to leave the tiniest little margin on the sides. Okay, and so this is the overhang that I was talking about. Again, it's a lot easier to trim it from here than it is to try to do that right where the crease is. And it's up to you whether you want to cut this with your snips or put it back in the trimmer. I'm just going to use my snips, and I'll do it from the inside of the card so that I can see this as a guideline. So go ahead and double check your card. The intention was to have a little bit of a gap here because that sliding mechanism needs some space in order to fit on the card. And I see that I have a little bit of a gap, but not quite as much as I intended. So I'm going to put it back in my trimmer and just shave a tiny bit off. I want about 1/16 of an inch there. If your gap is a little bit bigger than that, that's fine. You just don't want it too tight. So I'm putting it very, very close. This is how much we shaved off. Let's check it again and see. Okay, now that looks good. There's about a 1/16 of an inch gap, and it's even all the way through. Now you can change the size of this bottom flap if you wanted it to go a little bit lower or a little bit higher, but I chose this measurement so that the green from the panel on the inside will peek through in this gap, and that just looked a little bit better than if it were showing the white portion instead. Let's go ahead and put the sentiment banner onto the card. Now I've already placed the dimensional foam stickers on the back, and I've taken off the backing. I think the instructions have you place 3 dimensionals. I mail most of my cards, and so I tend to use a lot just because I like having that extra structural support as it goes through the mail. So I used a lot more than 3. In particular, I like to have support under the little fishtail here. So I do go through extra dimensionals and also the foam adhesive sheets. Now I'm going to put this here just so I have a guide for placement. It's going to go down right about here, and so I think I want my banner up here. I'll put a few of the embellishments on. I changed my mind about that one, so I'm gently lifting it up and putting it somewhere else. Now it's time to use these little pieces. 2 of them have score lines, so we'll go ahead and fold those. And then we're going to adhere them to the back of this piece that does not have the score lines. So I'm going to put glue on just one of these flaps. And then I'm going to adhere it to the solid piece. And I'm lining up the edges. So now it looks like this, and here's what it looks like from the side. This was our folded piece right here, and then this is our solid piece. And we're just going to let that glue set. Then we're going to take our other folded piece and again just put glue on one of the flaps. Doesn't matter which one. And now we're going to glue it to the solid piece again. Now the fold should be towards the middle and lined up with the other fold. So now from the side, these are the 2 free flaps from our folded pieces. And now these are going to get glued onto the camper. And so from the side, this is what it's going to look like. So I've put glue on both of those surfaces, and I'm going to center it to the back of the camper. So to place the camper onto the card, I find it easiest to go ahead and slide it onto the bottom panel first, kind of like this, and then tuck in the top panel. And then go ahead and slide it through. Now, if you're meeting resistance as you do this, you can go back and trim a little bit more from this gap to make sure that there's enough space. And the other thing that you can do to troubleshoot it is to take your bone folder and basically insert it into these slots and kind of push down on it. That will help create a little bit of separation so that the edges of your card can fit through. So once again, I put it on like this. And there you go. If you want, you can glue a little tab here that says pull. By now, most of the people who get cards from me know that there's some interactive thing for them to do, so they know to pull on something like this. But if there's any doubt, I will either tell them or put a little post-it on it, so that's another option as well. So here's our completed card. The camper keeps the card folded closed, and then you slide it off to open the card. There's another greeting on the inside and room for you to write your message. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity and that you'll have a chance to try it for yourself as well. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time, and until then, have a great day.